Good evening.
What's it?
Thank you everyone for joining us here tonight. We have a huge crowd. This is the biggest crowd we've had for a Ward 8 community meeting while I've been councilman. That's only been like 4 times in person. But this is wonderful to see. So for those I haven't met, my name is Shamus Malik. I'm the councilperson for Ward 8. Today we have a very special guest, our new APS superintendent, Christine Fowler-Mack. Christine has Christine's going to present first, and then I'm going to have some city updates. And then we're also going to hear from Officer Aaron Brown with our Akron Police Department, and also have time for any questions you might have, whether for APS or for the city. I do want to take a second and recognize whole plethora of distinguished guests that we have here. I think we have most of our school board. We have Lisa Mansfield with our school board. We have Bruce Alexander with our school board. Dr. Curtis Walker, who was with our school board for many, many years. And Councilwoman Linda Amobian, our Ward 8 neighbor and my colleague on City Council. And we also have a number of other folks joining us from Akron Public Schools. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, Christine, for your attention. Yeah. So just a brief introduction of you, right? Our superintendent is an East High School graduate. Right? She then went on to get her bachelor's and master's at the University of Akron. She spent time in leadership at the Cleveland Heights University Heights School District, as well as the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, the second largest school district in our state. And now, as of this past year, this year, she has taken on the difficult but important job of superintendent of Akron Public Schools. And you are also the first female superintendent in 174 years. So without further ado, our speaker, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate on a very beautiful day, each of you being here this evening to really dialogue with me and with our team about where we are in the Akron Public Schools, both the successes that are happening and our vision for the future, but also as we kind of reset and problem solve some of the challenges that we have been experiencing right here, even in the ward, as one example. And so I hope that this is an opportunity both to share openly, but then also to engage you and to be able to answer your questions for what it is I do know. And I also am joined by some stellar educators that felt it important that they also be here with me so that they could be a resource to make sure that as many of your questions that you have are answered, and so that you could also really feel and witness by their presence, their support as well for each of our schools, and especially tonight we're talking about the schools here in Ward 8. So before I get into really prepared remarks, I'd like to introduce my colleagues who are here. First and foremost, thank you, Mr. Larry Jackson, for being here, the principal of Firestone High School. We also have as well Mary Outley Kelly, who is our Executive Director of Elementary Schools. We also have Mark Black, who is our Executive Director of Secondary Schools. We have our Director of Student Services, Dan Rambler, who is here with us as well, and our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, so all of our curriculum and programming. We have Karen Gijic, who is also a Ward 8 resident as well. Is that Mrs. Farrell? Jessica. Okay, yes. Sorry about that. Okay. I'm still learning all the names, but I'm getting there. So thank you for being here as well. that's what happens when you start calling names. And so, but I want to just thank everybody. First and foremost, I will just say that, as was mentioned in the introduction, being here and serving in the Akron Public Schools for me is kind of a lifetime come full circle. I pinch myself each and every morning, and I can honestly say I have found it easy to wake up every single day because of the honor and privilege it is to come back to the community that nurtured you, that supported you, that pushed you to really be at your best, to then be able to come back and serve in this environment. I do not take in any way, shape, or form the trust that has been extended to me lightly, nor the opportunity to work with amazing educators. And wait, before I go on, I did forget to mention one other partner in education. So Pat Scheib is here. So Pat Scheib is our president of our teachers union. And Pat, we appreciate you being here as well. So she is also a colleague. So please, welcome that. So again, it is such a pleasure to be able to be back in my home and to be able to introduce my home to my family in this unique way, because we will ultimately be settling here as we complete the raising of our children. For those of you that don't already know, I'm a mom of two. I have a 9-year-old who is a 3rd grade student, and I have a 16-year-old who is in the 11th grade. My husband is a retired police officer, so just retired after 35 years. And so I'm really pleased at the timing of that because it allows me to be able to put my full energy into this role and into service to the community and to the children here in Akron, knowing that my own family is amply supported because he has more flexibility at this time. So I really feel like the stars aligned well for that. I have tremendous positive memories of the city of Akron. So I grew up in the East Akron Goodyear Heights community, and really found myself heavily engaged in the Akron Public Schools. So much so, when I really think about Ward 8, it makes me smile because I had a lot of instances where I was able, as a student, to engage within this community while never being a West Sider. So I wasn't fortunate to be able to live on the West Side at any point in my upbringing, but did engage a lot as a student. One of the things that benefited me, I think, was that our district thought about us as rising leaders. And so from the student exchanges that I was able to take place when our student councils exchanged ideas and spent days at each other's school buildings, I was able to do that at Firestone High School. As well, I was an athlete, and so playing basketball, I had many days of competition as well in Firestone High School. Although I will say, back in the day, in the old building, the girls always played in the small gym that kind of had like a rubbery floor, I remember, because if you fell, oh my goodness, the skins to your leg were painful. But we never were able to play on kind of the boys' floor, which was the big contest setting for the City Series championships and things of that nature. I'm also, on the musical side, just remember with such great fondness May Festival. And so being able to come to the May Festival, which was the showcase of choirs and arts, come in the daytime, to be able to be released from school for practice and then the performances. So there are a great number of extremely fond memories about that. And it should be a testament to leadership and to, I think, the high standards that the community has and has upheld in its schools, that even with all of these years, you know, the outputs of excellence, of student achievement, have only continued to get stronger. So even today, as I was, really reflecting back on what is it that I really want to convey, I really want to convey an understanding of who Ward 8 is, the rich traditions of excellence that it is founded upon, and the expectations that brings. And to congratulate leaders like Mr. Johnson and our team for continuing to support all of the schools in this ward. Our IB programs in the ward are thriving. IB is, an international curriculum that very early on, the best families sought out for their children. And to be offering that as a framework for what it is we believe about teaching and learning, that kids ought to have certain skills, but they also ought to have certain traits. They ought to be encouraged to have values, and to be able to think about the connections to their learning is something that makes a whole lot of sense. And so I'm really pleased to see the array of IB offerings that are present in the community and that are thriving. And quite honestly, it's something that Mary Otley Kelly tells me all the time. Are we thinking we want to take that concept further to scale because it's just good for kids? And I think we see evidence of that in the achievement scores, and not only in the scores, but in who our students are becoming when you engage with them and hear from them. So there is a great deal that is positive and that is working. I commend you for the steady leadership and know that we need to keep that standard high and ever improving. We in the school district are continuing to think about the future and really to try to get even clearer about the types of teaching and learning and the learner that we are trying to produce, not just by exception to say that we want a few students who do well, but to say as the norm, we want to ensure that our students are supported and expected to achieve and to become at very high levels. Towards that end, we've been doing some work in the district to add to the good work that is already in place. One of those things we've been working on is to be able to articulate with clarity what is the graduate that we are trying to produce. So in your materials, you have an example of kind of a visual that outlines the portrait of the Akron Public Schools graduate. And that is to say, for all students, these are the competencies and habits, learner habits, and life habits that we are trying to reinforce. As well, as we did that work, we said, well, we can't just have the end visualized and expect persons to know what that means along the way. We also need to make sure that we are being clear about how can I tell if my child is on the pathway, and what message do we want to be able to send also to our elementary and middle school parents. And you will also see in your materials that there is a profile of a scholar. And so that is to say, for our elementary students who are on their way to becoming that scholar, that we should even be seeing more and more crystallized in our middle school and high school levels. What is it that by the time students are exiting our elementary schools, that we will know if they are on track? And then we are organizing to ensure that our curriculum, that our supports, that the opportunities, that our exposure of students, because we really believe that students aren't limited just because of there's some intellectual, limit to certain students. Students usually thrive when given exposure, challenge, and support. And we want to ensure that that is the case. So you have that profile, if you will, of a scholar for elementary schools, and then as well for the high school graduate with clarity to say, who is it that we're trying to produce. We've then gone even a step further, and so we've been working this year to say, if those things are true, then we also need to be able to articulate what the environment is, what the vision is for excellence through equity, what that looks like in our day-to-day experiences for our learners. And so we are going to be soon asking for some feedback on a visionary statement that is dynamic, and it's meant for us to be clear about what should the environment, the culture look like, feel like, what should the experiences be that ensure that that graduate, that emerging scholar is really going to come to fruition. And so we hope that by getting clearer, by being more intentional about our programming, by having visible metrics where not only we can monitor our own work, but you as citizens engaged in our schools can monitor along with us, that those types of things are in place. So as we continue to move the college and career academies of Akron forward, doing so again, producing that graduate, ensuring that developmentally along the way our students are on track in an environment that ensures excellence through equity. We really think that we have the chance to achieve our ultimate goal of being one of the highest performing schools in our nation. So we do have big goals, and we're excited to do this work and feel like there is a strong foundation on which to build. So I talked about the fact, and you have some things in the packet that talk about a lot of the very positive things happening. So we already talked about our IB curriculum. We are now instituting throughout, we'll have eventually, like in all of our wards, family resource centers. So we know that as we continue to learn more and dialogue with both community members at large, but our families, and taking the advice of our teachers, we know that not only do we need to expect, we also need to support. And so we have introduced a concept of family resource centers in collaboration with United Way and supported by an array of partners. We have them located so far at three of our community learning centers, Robinson, Helen Arnold, and Mickey Bright School. But as I said, we're continuing to offer more and more of those types of supports within the community. We also continue to try to exhibit lessons that we learned during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, I think we learned very quickly out of just mere survival that we could function, and we could function at a high level, infusing technology more into the teaching and learning experience. And so as we have returned, we know that nothing replaces a face-to-face interactive experience. So we're very pleased to be able to be back and are doing so with safety precautions in place. But we are continuing to innovate with how it is we effectively use technology and to make sure that it is a gateway to providing more experiences, that it is a resource to supporting our students, but that we don't depend on any one thing, because nothing replaces the relationship and interaction with our teachers. But in terms of what's happening, we are continuing to explore and innovate around technology. So in your handout as well, you have a document that speaks to our focus, and what it is that we at the system are focused upon, and how we're continuing to expand programming as we learn more about the needs of our students. With all of the very positive things that are happening, we also felt it important tonight to really talk about this unique year. because this unique year in the return, it's our first full year, as you know, really starting the year in a face-to-face, one-to-one context for our students after them having been in a remote or virtual, inconsistent environment for nearly 2 years. And to say it's been a challenging year, I think would be an understatement. As you might expect, after students who have been home, some not in structured environments at all, to be back in a school setting with a routine, with peers, many of whom they haven't been with in nearly a year and a half to 2 years. Many of the students, it's their first year in a setting. So for our current 10th graders, their entire 9th grade year was virtually spent in a virtual type state. So it's their true first time being in a high school setting, along with our 9th graders who are newly in that grade as well. And for those of you that have the elementary school students, it's the same thing on the other end of the continuum. We have students that didn't even complete their elementary experience that now have found themselves almost a year and a half later in the middle school. It's been, we are really teaching routines, teaching structure, teaching how to do school all anew. And for many of our students, they've been able to fall into the expectations, follow expectations, fall into routines quite well. There is a small minority of students, so a small few, that have not been responding well to the structure, to the expectations, and we entered this year, I think with the right focus of saying, we are glad to be back. We want to assess where students are. We want to get our arms wrapped around what their needs are. We want to exhibit great amounts of social, emotional support, knowing that many of the students experience trauma. So that is where we started. It is not to say we have been absent of expectation for our students, but we have been higher on the support ends of things than we have really instituting tons of consequences and things of that nature for some levels of the misbehavior. We are, by this Friday, at the place where we have completed our first quarter of school, and we have been responding, supporting, modifying as we've gone along in the course of this year. But as we go into, thank you, the second quarter of this school year, which is starting on Monday, we are prepared to ask for higher levels of expectation and to really ask for the support of our families in working with us as we ensure that the teaching and learning environment is an even stronger environment. So you in the ward, and especially for those of you who are Firestone parents, you've probably already seen, because of the adjustments along the way, some of the ways in which we've modified our practice. So things like we have added additional security staff, to the school, and we still have additional security staff that is forthcoming. We have done complete safety walks to really assess not only the schedule and how the schedule is accommodating or is contributing to some of the challenges that have taken place at the school, and we have made adjustments accordingly with that. We have instituted practices about regularly monitoring portions of the building that are places where kids like to congregate. Even when I was a child going to school, although I was a very good student and I did not get in trouble at any point in time, but you knew places in the building that weren't monitored as frequently, and places where you could dip in kind of hang out with your friends and not be where you were supposed to be. We too are aware of places like that and have instituted, with the full support of the staff there, asking even our staff to be more visible during classroom changes, things of that nature. And we are monitoring those places where we know young people have a tendency to make poor choices, including having routines of checking bathrooms, and things of that nature, the auditorium where there should be no programming at certain parts of the day, to make sure that we are doing walkthroughs. So our administrative team, and with the support of broad staff in general, do have routines in place to be doing that kind of vigilant checking. You might have seen, and I would assume many of you saw, going through social media recently, an instance where a student took a picture inside the school and was brandishing a weapon, and which was unsettling to us all. We took that instance, that safety instance, very, very seriously, and again, regrouped, assessed, and made adjustments. And so, again, there are monitoring procedures in place to be able to watch who is coming into our schools. We are not using all of our entrances, and so if you're hearing young people say they used to be able to enter one way, it's now inconvenient to have to go through other doors or things like that. Please bear with us. We're trying to be just to assure that those types of precautions are in place to ensure everyone's safety and security within the school environment, and not only at the high school, but we're doing this at multiple ones of our schools. We are using with some frequency right now our metal detectors and doing the nature